The second season of the Gilded Age recently came to an end, and what a season it was. The story was elevated from the first season, and it truly transformed the show to another level. With the characters being one of the main things that makes this show so good, I thought I'd rank all of the main characters from worst to best in the show, and determine who sits on top in terms of performance by the actor and also the likability too. So let's get into it. Here is the Gilded Age every character ranked. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Cousin Dashiell. Coming in last place out of all of the characters is Dashiell. Whilst the character was performed well, we saw a side to him which was almost on the cusp of taking over Marian's life. He ambushed her with a proposal in front of everybody, and also didn't believe that the teaching that she was doing was a real job. So when Marian decided to call off the wedding to him, I was pleased. The only redeeming quality to Dashiell was the fact that he didn't take it in a bad way, which was a surprise to be honest, but in general he just wasn't that likable, hence the reason that he's so low on the list. The Duke. Similar in terms of Dashiell, and another part of what looks like a relationship that he somehow forced himself into is the Duke. He's essentially somebody who will go wherever depending on the highest bidder and the best offer. That kind of said everything that we needed to know about the Duke. Whilst we didn't get much screen time in this season of the show, I feel we'll get more in the next season, and maybe, just maybe, he'll go up the ranking ever so slightly. Maud Beaton. Maud the Grifter is a character that deserves to be low on this list. However, I've not put her rock bottom because the performance from the actor was one which was convincing, and she made us fall for her charm and security like she made Oscar do. So her performance was something which was extremely convincing. She had some great outfits in the show, and the bright pink was a colour that I think of when I think of the character. Mrs. Armstrong. Now this is a character that is just purely moody. Whilst I know it's the way that the character has been written, I can't help but get dragged down whenever she says a line. She doesn't ever have a nice word to say about anybody, but she expects people to treat her with respect. The moment that solidified it for me was when Jack had the good news about his clock and the patent, and she still couldn't even be nice to him then. So yeah, she deserves to be low down on this list. The McNeils. The McNeils I'm kind of pairing together as one. Although they are different in the behaviours and attitudes, they both had a similar amount of screen time as one another. I would say that I prefer Mrs. McNeil to her husband, as she had a caring and compassionate side to her, whereas Mr. McNeil went behind his wife's back in order to get rid of her father. So just like some of the other characters that I've mentioned, he embodies similar traits to them, hence the low ranking. Mr. Fortune. Mr. Fortune was a character that was very well written and performed, and for that I rate Sullivan Jones. However, he was a bit slimy in the way that he was with Peggy. They were good friends and worked together, but he ended up kissing her and cheating on his wife and wanting to continue it. He didn't bat an eyelid in doing so, even after we found out that he'd just had a baby with her, so it showed what the character's true personality was like, and it made me respect him less. Mrs. Astor. Whilst there's nothing to really make me dislike Mrs. Astor that much, I just think her part in the opera war was a side that I didn't take, so naturally I'm going to gravitate towards not really liking her as much as many of the other characters. The performance by Donna Murphy was great, and she really captured the persona of somebody who was high up in terms of being a socialite, whilst also having the yearning to hold on to the position and influence that she held. So whilst being a great performance, the character in themselves just wasn't that likable for me. Mr. McAllister. Now, Mr. McAllister was a likable character, despite the fact that he was a bit of a snake and made himself open on both sides of the opera war. This was so he'd never truly be on the losing side, even though he kind of was by the end. The performance of the character was so animated, and I loved the light-hearted, friendly tone that he had. His accent was something that was quite refreshing on the ears, and the way that Nathan Lane would deliver his lines was top-notch. I would have actually liked to have seen him just a little bit more in the show. Church. Out of the two main butlers, I'd say that Church is the one that comes in second place. But there's not much wrong with the character or the performance. There's something that makes me feel like we just get a bit more emotion and care from Bannister. Church does look out for the workers, and his kind words towards Watson and him being there for him during the time where he didn't know if he was going to stay or go was a real standout moment for the character. Bannister. Bannister is a character that I really like in the show. He's almost like a kind uncle or a grandfather, and we see that best when he's with Jack, as he's truly been there for him and helped him out when he hasn't needed to. And when you think about it, through Bannister's connections, Jack has actually had some success. We saw Bannister go back on his letter that he wrote to Mr. Russell about church, and his soft-hearted nature is something which is quite refreshing to watch. The performance and delivery is something that I'm also a fan of. His accent and tone of voice works so well for the role that he's playing. Gladys Russell. I really like Gladys Russell, but I just can't justify putting her any higher than this, as my only issue with the character is that we just didn't really see her that much. I can remember we had a bit of time with her in episode 2, a bit of time with the Duke partway through the season, and then she just vanished for a while, so it's unfair to put her higher than most of the other main characters. Gladys's delivery is always so nice to watch, and you really get the innocence from her, in the sense that she doesn't know what her parents are doing and that she's a pawn in their game. But I imagine with more screen time she'll jump up the ranking in the next season of the show. Peggy Scott. Peggy is a very likable character, and she's performed extremely well, but out of all of the leads in the show, she has ranked quite low. I enjoyed the story that she was in when she was down in the South and we saw her navigating new territory, and also her fighting for the black community for them to have opportunity, something which I think is inspiring to watch on screen. But I would say that she probably has the least amount of screen time when it comes to the other characters with a similar level of weight, so it just means that I naturally don't connect to her as much. Mr. Watson. In terms of side characters, I was a big fan of Mr. Watson, and it's a shame that he's probably been written out of the show. He was a character who had his child's best interests at heart, and that was something which cut through the screen so well. Whilst he didn't have a large involvement in the show, his story and soft nature was something that was definitely memorable. Mrs. Winterton. Now, Mrs. Winterton is a character that I just love to hate, and I think she's been written perfectly for the audience to actually think that. Formerly Miss Turner, we've seen her transform, and seeing the once lady's maid now marry into wealth was a good twist for the show to take. Don't get me wrong, she was sneaky, entitled, whined a lot, and she was looking to do everything that she could to take down Bertha. But no matter how hard she tried, she just couldn't do it, and it made it even better that it was unsuccessful. She's definitely a standout character in this season of the show. Reverend Forte. Reverend Forte was a good addition to the show in this season, and his blossoming relationship with Ada was something which brought joy to another character that deserved it. I do feel the handling of his story was just a bit rushed though. We were introduced to him, he got married to Ada, he got sick, and then he died, all in the space of a few episodes. So it meant that we could never truly connect with him to the level that I would have liked to. Oscar. Oscar had some good stories in this season of the show, and I do really like the character. However, he can be frustrating at times, but I think he's been written to be like that. I think we got some good emotional range from the character in this season, and we saw him at both ends of the spectrum when it came to being happy and excited, to then feeling upset, distraught, and like the family's lives were going to be destroyed because of him. I feel we'll get a hefty involvement from him in the next season when it does return, and it's a character that I'm looking forward to seeing again. Jack. What I like about Jack is that he's almost like the average chap that you're just rooting to do well, and the show really got that across in this season. His passion, hunger, and desire for better is something that I feel we can all relate to, and it made the character all the more likable, and it made you want to get behind him. Seeing everybody put some money in for him to apply for the patent that he needed was a moment which showed just how kind-hearted the character was. And although we didn't get loads of screen time with him, the delivery of the character was always so effortless and performed well by Ben. Ada. We're now edging towards the top of the list. Ada is a very likable character and she doesn't put a foot wrong, to be honest. She's the contrast to her sister Agnes and doesn't hold the sharp tongue and frosty nature that Agnes does, which ultimately provides balance and stability to the Van Rhijn household. Watching her love story was refreshing to see, and the heartbreak that she went through hit hard because you truly felt for the character. Cynthia Nixon does a great job in the role, and I don't think I could see anybody else doing as good of a job. George Russell. Within this season, I feel like we got to see some great moments from George. Despite being the power-hungry, family-loving man that he is, we saw the sense of conflict that was in his mind when it came to the story that was taking place which surrounded the workers that were on strike. And it ultimately resulted with us seeing a more human side to the character with a bit more of a compassionate nature to him. He feels like an imposing figure and somebody that gets what he wants if he puts his mind to it, and that's something that the show gets across so well. His relationship with Bertha is something that is also enjoyable to watch on screen. Larry Russell. I'm a huge fan of Larry in the show. He serves a similar purpose to what Jack does in the sense that he's a happy-go-lucky guy that treats people with the respect that they deserve. His story with Mrs. Roebling was something that really showed the good in the character, and it added to the likability that he has within him. His involvement in the storyline of the will they, won't they with Marian was something which had everybody on the edge of their seats, and we got the result that we all wanted. Agnes. Agnes is definitely one of my favourite characters in the show, and she deserves the spot as number 3. She's so different to everybody else, and the cold exterior that she has is so incredibly funny. That contrasted with her soft, warm interior and her responses to some things which you just wouldn't expect to happen really does provide moments which draw you in and make you appreciate when she's like that. Christine Baranski was born for this role, and there's not a chance that anybody would do a better job than what she does. Bertha Russell. Coming in second place on this list is Bertha. Her strong-willed nature and her desire to go out and to be the best is something which is great to watch. We saw her encounter many issues in this season, but she still managed to overcome them whilst also coming out on top. She cares for her family, and that's something that I like to see from the character. But with her decision to essentially pawn off her daughter during the finale is something that I think is going to come back to get her in the next season. Her story with Mrs. Winterton, the opera war, her interfering with Larry's love life, and her questioning if George was lying to her were all things that were gripping and enjoyable to watch in the second season. Carrie Coon is so good in this role in terms of the emotions that she delivers, and also the passion that you get from the character. A definite favourite of mine, and one that I think deserves to be so high up on this ranking. You take away Bertha Russell and you lose a large part of what makes the show so good. Marian. Coming in first place, and the character that I think is the best in the entirety of the show is Marian. There's something about Marian that I feel as a viewer you just instantly connect to. The kind-hearted nature, the want to go against what society says in making a difference, the strength to stand up for what's right and what she believes in, and the love that she has for her family are the things that really come through the screen when watching. I enjoyed watching her conflict on what to do with regards to Larry and Dashiell, and also her getting involved and helping out Peggy. She's almost like the lens for us to watch the show through in certain times, and it definitely works. She's a woman in the 1800s but with a 21st century mindset, and it's inspiring to watch. Louisa Jacobson smashes this role, and there's nobody else that I could see doing it. She definitely deserves to be at the top and also to be number 1 on this ranking. So, there you have it. The Gilded Age Every Character Ranked.